this enlightening conversation, Aaron and I dive into spirituality, personal growth, and share the profound wisdom found in nature. Aaron shares his unique journey from growing up in a commune to traveling the world studying ecology, uncovering the lessons that shaped his path. Together, we explore the power of presence, empathy, and compassion in fostering deeper connections with ourselves and others. We also discuss the delicate balance of light and darkness in our lives and the importance of sharing stories to inspire and awaken those on their own spiritual journeys. Please welcome Aaron French. Welcome to my show, Aaron.
Great. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you.
So, tell my audience about your spiritual journey. It sounds like when we talked before, you had a lot to say, and it was quite beautiful to hear.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, my spiritual journey has been a long and twisty one. And throughout my life in various ways, it has just, spirit kept on like tapping me on the shoulder and pulling me towards this truth of this flow of life. For much of my life, even though I was sort of on the fringes of the spiritual path and even sort of medium deep into it, I would say at the times, I was still very rational. I was still thinking I was a scientist and gonna be a famous renowned scientist and go down that path, and still sort of for most of my life spirituality was something that was on the edge of my life, maybe sort of supporting it in some way. Looking back, I never thought that I would be where I am now, where spirituality is the core of what I do and what I transmit and how I relate to the world. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in sort of a alternative commune community when I was very little, and then on sort of like a 1 acre homestead. I was always outside with the garden, with the animals, with the farm. And I became a scientist. I became an ecologist in college and studied the birds and monkeys in the rainforest. And that really opened up my energy to the beauty of nature. I used to say like nature and the forest was my church if I wanted to find religion. My grandfather was a minister, and his father and his father, back generations. And my dad turned away from religion, and I was raised without any religion at all. Wasn't raised like to be against it or for it. I was just sort of, there was no mention of spirituality or religion at all growing up for me specifically. But I kept sort of being called to find it. Like in college I read Thich Nhat Hanh, and things like that. Just, oh, mindfulness. Oh, this is nice. And through some serendipity, when I was traveling in Central America, I stumbled across Ram Dass in a book, his book Be Here Now, in a little hut in Belize, just randomly, like, oh, what's this interesting book? And it sort of blew my mind open, and things like that kept happening. Um, I was blessed with many teachers over the years. I had a tantric guru that I met randomly one day, and then I initiated into his path for a while and lived with him. Did, really intensive sort of classical Vedic studies of mantra and puja and ritual of all kinds. And then that ended badly when, as these things do, there was all kinds of allegations of financial and sexual abuse against his students, against my friends. He fled to Thailand and that ended. But it took me a while to integrate that. I had a Taoist teacher for many years thereafter, and other teachers appeared. And finally, but through all of that, spirituality was still sort of on the fringes. I was at that point, I got an MBA and was an executive, doing really well in my career, flying around in private jets and doing negotiations in the biggest boardrooms in the country, and outwardly very successful, and then also pretty miserable. I had a relationship in my second marriage dissolved, and I came to this point in my life, and this was in 2018, when I just realized, okay, I give up. I'm not going to continue to go forward living my life the way I lived it before. I just need to surrender and do something different. And that's when really everything changed for me.
Wow, that's truly powerful.
Yeah.
So, how much of the world did you see?
I traveled around a lot. It's a great wide world, but like I lived studying the honey creepers of Hawaii for a year on a couple of different islands. I was, through Central America, a little bit of time in Brazil. Mostly, I spent a couple years doing a master's project where I lived in the jungle of Cameroon, in the Congo Basin rainforest. And there I lived, like, it was a 20-mile hike out from the nearest tiny town that was a full day drive on terrible dirt roads from the capital. And, we lived on little platforms in the middle of this rainforest reserve. And there, my guides and friends were the Baka hunter-gatherers that had lived in that forest for, since before time was measured, basically. It's looking back, it's sort of an interesting story where just a few years before I got there, the EU made this preserve. The European Union, went into Africa and still sort of post-colonial said, okay, this land is a reserve and we're going to fund it. But then, of course, the people who had lived there forever, the Baka, these hunter-gatherer pygmies, weren't allowed to live there anymore, right? But they were allowed to then, support me and be my guides as a scientist in the forest. So we would walk the forest, and I was studying and looking at the birds and monkeys and using my binoculars all day. And meanwhile, they were there with me, guiding me and supporting me, but also collecting the mushrooms and the fruits and all the things in the forest. Okay, yeah, we'll just keep going. So, yeah, and that was a really beautiful chance for me to really experience this other culture of these people that had just were so deeply part of the forest, in the forest, meshed with all things, that it really sort of also broke open my mind into what's possible. As a scientist, we were taught, and as even as a Western person, I was taught like there's us and there's nature. And even, at the time I was like, I'm going to go study the rainforest and fix, the regeneration on the edges and like regrow the forest and do all these things. Meanwhile, these people were just living in the forest and they were the forest. There was no difference. They would sing, they were very musical, and they would sing songs, and they would say like, we're singing with the trees, with the water, with everything, with the
That's
sky.
amazing. I'm glad you got to experience that. I'm learning a lot on the spiritual journey, not so much like travel wise, but just about myself. And meditation is just a phenomenal
Yeah.
thing. And like yesterday, I meditated for like 3 hours, and then I was like 6 pages of my journal just nonstop, like just writing. And then I went on YouTube because I do content every day, and I spoke it, and like I like how we're talking like difference of opinions and
Hmm.
how like we're all fighting, and we don't understand why we're fighting, but it has to do with our ego and how our ego just kind of takes over us. And I know for myself, I struggled with trauma my entire
Yes.
life. But as it turns out, I created that trauma
Yes.
because I manifested it. And I learned like I just by studying the law of assumption and how like we can just create our realities. And I'm learning now, like just even when it comes to like people, like before, if like I was around like tense people, I would become tense. But because I've been practicing meditation so
Yes.
much and just being with my thoughts, and I stopped watching TV, I stopped smoking marijuana, I stopped like doing all those
Hmm.
things. And because I've done that, I feel like a totally different person. And yeah, and it's like my
Totally different person.
reality
Yeah.
is appearing before my eyes as a different person. And I don't even realize that it's happening until I get on camera now, because I used to be terrified to get on camera. Yeah. And
Interesting.
because of something that happened to me in
Yeah.
high school. And now it's not a problem. And it's the more you learn about yourself, I find the more not only can you help yourself, but you can help others because they're in a different state of consciousness than you are. But you were in that state of consciousness at one point. So you can kind of help them to get out of that state of consciousness.
And a lot of it's transmission of our energy, right? We don't even need our words. Our words are beautiful conduits to carry the transmission of the vibrations into people, and they give information too. But you know this, right? So much of working with a teacher and so much of receiving even teachings from through YouTube, through this podcast, through wherever is just receiving the vibrational transmission, right? Because we're both human, we carry vibrations in a similar way, and so we can transmit and share them back and forth. And that's just so powerful. I loved what you said about, just dropping in and meditating and learning everything about yourself. Before I went to Africa for those couple years, I had a man became a spiritual teacher of mine, and he wrote me this postcard at the time. It was before texting, and he was like, "You don't need to go to Africa. You have everything you need within you." And, I was still young, even though I had had these spiritual teachers, and even though I knew in my heart the truth of this, I was still sort of young and arrogant and was like, no, I'm going to make my mark. My ego was still very much like, I'm going to be something, all this. Uh, so I received that postcard and I knew he was true, and it kind of made me more resolute in my ego to like prove him wrong. And of course, he was entirely right. I didn't need to go. But until we realize that we don't need to go to Africa, and until we realize that we can just sit for however many hours, for us at that moment and just be and actually discover the whole universe within ourselves, Until we realize that, then we do need to do the things we need to do to allow ourselves to get to this place of equanimity where we just give up and sit. We don't give up, right? We just sort of realign into a new state of being where we say, I don't need the alcohol. I don't need to wake and bake every day. I don't need the caffeine. Like, we can just sit and be with what is and then experience what
Absolutely.
happens. And that's everything, right? And that is everything. There's truly no limit. There's no limit to what we can experience literally by just being with ourselves because, the truth is everything is one. And here we are as manifestations of
Definitely.
the
Yeah,
one
no, I
who, which
love
is
that
everything.
because I'm just learning so much. And even when you read books, like I've been reading a lot about Neville Goddard, and I just finished The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it was like there was a moment where I would
Yeah.
struggle with anxiety because I'm an empath. So I feel everybody's energy. I can also hear everybody's energy. So it's extremely overwhelming. And I used to struggle when I come home from Costco. I would have headaches, I would have tension. And then I read The Power Now, and he's like, when you get in that present moment, and I did, and I couldn't hear a single thing in Costco. And this place was packed, and I mean packed. And you could see everybody's anxieties, but it was like
Beautiful.
there was a bubble around me that just protected me from these energies, these vibrations from entering my soul. So it was beautiful. Yeah.
I love that so much. There's a couple ways to, I'm also an empath and growing up, especially as a man, right? As a man growing up through this time, being sensitive, being empathetic was often used as a slur against me, was often used as an insult, was often used. So, again, for a long time in my ego, I would try to push that away, but of course, it's impossible to push it away. What you do is you say, then I ended up getting migraines and getting anxiety and getting, I had a stutter for many years where I couldn't really talk very much all through my elementary, junior high years, and even beyond. I developed this massive stutter with anxiety. I just couldn't handle things speaking. Skipping ahead to now and just being in the present, you mentioned a bubble around you, which is beautiful, but also for protection, I love the way of just shining so brightly from our hearts. When we just shine so brightly with love from our hearts, there's so much light in all directions that nothing that isn't aligned and harmonious with that light can enter. So we don't even need to necessarily make a bubble to protect ourselves. We can just be so purely ourselves that then we're protected in safety just from the light of our beingness, right? And we can still be open to all things, but only those frequencies can enter which can harmonize. Because, right, even science proves that energies and frequencies will harmonize and change other frequencies around them. So when we shine so deeply in ourselves with softness, we can actually be as maybe sometimes even more deeply
Absolutely.
protected than if
Yeah,
we
no, I
hadn't have
like
a
that
bubble.
too. That's just it's cool. Like just to like spirituality. It's just like just something like a new earth kind of almost like you're in a different dimension. You're feeling your emotions, but you're also accepting your emotions. You're accepting your failures. You're accepting your challenges, and you're accepting others because I've been there. So I know like what insecurity is. I know what anxiety is. I know what depression is. I know what fear is. So when you see others that are around you that are like reactive to you, you're just like, that is ego. That is fear. That is anxiety. That's not the person. That's their state of conscience. So it's like,
That's
I
not the
don't want to fight
person.
you. I don't want to dictate with you. I don't want to debate with you because, or compete with you because I was you.
Yeah. And you still are them energetically, right? We're just protecting ourselves. My Taoist teacher taught through the lineage I learned there's this 12-stage map of human awareness, human consciousness, human evolution. And like the first six stages are we're in duality, and then there's even in non-duality, there's six more stages of awakening. But there's this stage four, it's called, it doesn't matter the number, but stage four is this area of awakening where we actually drop into our heart centers in Taoism, our heart wisdom. And we're not 100% healed, like we still have shadow and things to work through, but we're enough healed that we can drop into our hearts and actually for the first time have compassion. and for the first time see another, and for the first time connect. And when we're in one, two, and three, we're entirely driven by those compulsions, by our fears, by our shadows, by our ego, all the things. And we're actually not truly connecting. We're not truly compassionate. We don't even actually really see the world around us. We're just entirely reacting to our own selves. And part of the spiritual process as we soften and meditate and open is that we gain the wisdom naturally through ourselves of dropping into our heart space, right? And this is talked about as like this shift into heart opening is literally a miracle. If everyone, or if even many of the people on the earth, majority perhaps, dropped into our heart space, we wouldn't have wars. We wouldn't have all the conflict. We wouldn't have all this division you mentioned earlier in this conversation, right? We would just be able to see each other, as you're mentioning, with compassion. And yeah, we still have all our stuff. We still have our lives and our experiences and our traumas, but we can
Definitely.
relate
But
with
I
compassion
find
to
like
that.
just even with what I've been reading, a lot of people that I've been on shows with is you have to have those moments in life because if you get too happy and too like complacent, you don't think for yourselves anymore. Your mind takes over you and then it can bring you to a dark place.
Yeah, and that's spiritual bypassing, right? All of us on earth have some experiences that are unique to each of us that are going to be a shock, a trauma, a difficulty, some fear, some anger, sadness, grief, rage, all will creep in. And we need to, like, one way to look at this is like the process of the spiritual journey and meditation, especially in the early stages, is really learning to wrap all of those parts of ourselves in this loving bubble and not bypass them, like hold them lovingly while we're still holding a higher view. So it's this yin yang of holding this this happy joy of connection with all things while simultaneously not ignoring but holding gently, like rocking those parts of ourselves with loving tenderness. And when we can hold both of those equally in balance, well, then we're in our center and we can go forward on the path and truly be on the path and truly be here. If we go only into our shadows, well, then we're not fully here. And if we go only into the happiness and the bypassing in all the ways, either, as you say.
It's a process. It's definitely, and I've learned just you're gonna learn every day. If when it's when you stop learning that your contract's fulfilled, and then it's time to move on.
Yeah, and it's a spiral. I love to say too, it's like a our life path on this from this perspective is like a bowl of spaghetti where we're all these noodles, and occasionally you pop up somewhere and think, ooh, I'm here on the path, I'm so evolved, right? Whatever, here I am. And then all of a sudden your spaghetti noodle like pops down to the bottom and is being smashed by a meatball and a mushroom in
Yeah.
the corner, and you're like, where the heck am I? Then you pop up somewhere else and you're like, oh, I'm back where I thought I was earlier. I thought I had evolved past this, and then we go again. Like there's it's a messy process from the inside, right? As we deepen into it, like I've been shown by my own insights and also by the support of angels and spirit guides of various kinds coming to me, that, there is a deep order to all of it. But then when we're in it, and especially in the earlier stages, we can't yet see that order and it feels really messy and scary. And so you mentioned, just reading all the books from all the sages, from all the traditions across time. I mean, these are here to point us in the direction of truth. These are these books, these poems, these epics, these channeled messages. Eckhart Tolle just channeled while he's sitting. These are all here to guide us, and so we can have the trust we need to work through this process until we can develop our own inner knowing. And then the books are still fun of just, it's beautiful to sit with books and just see of truth back at us. It's literally, as I sit here, I'm surrounded by piles of sacred books where, like my goal when I'm sitting around my house is I want a sacred, beautiful book or two or three within arm's reach wherever I sit. So that, I don't need to reach for my phone and Instagram. I can reach for a random sacred text and I move
That's
them around
awesome.
specifically so they're always available. So I can always just pick them up and just open a page
That's what
and
I love
see
about
what's there for
journaling
me to
too.
read.
In the mornings, I'll journal because I've been paying attention to my dreams a lot lately, and the subconscious has been showing me like basically
Beautiful.
parts of my past I have to let die, and so I've just been paying attention, like and becoming more aware, practice awareness, and practice mindfulness. I'm trying like my fiance, she's on the same path as me, so it's beautiful. So we get to share that as well, and it's just beautiful because it just gives you a new sense of purpose. Not even like just in life, but just around others who are struggling, who you think who are labeled as evil, who are labeled as terrible, but they're not terrible, they're not evil, they're hurting. And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I can't do it. Like I love everyone equally because I was there. I was on both sides. Went down the rabbit hole. I used to believe in politics. I used to believe in this.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. I used to believe in politics. Yeah, and I have so many people come to me for sessions with me of various kinds, and they're like, "Oh, you'll think I'm crazy, but I have this impulse that I'm meant for something more in various ways, and then they'll tell me, and I'm like, no, no, you're not crazy at all. And and the commonality sometimes, really often, they go in clusters where in one week I'll have three or four people who are sort of at the same place in the journey, and they say it in their own way, but they're like, I'm at the same place where, like, oh, you'll think I'm crazy, but actually I know I'm supposed to be a speaker on a stage around this topic, and I'll have three or four people come to me at one time that are sort of flowing through my path. And then, but yeah, we're all, it's important to say to all your listeners, and I think all your listeners, I'm sure, know this, all of our listeners, like the spiritual path and the awakening and that the happy, simple joy that comes from just being is available to everyone, everywhere. So wherever you are, there's literally no impediments. Wherever you are. And I know for some people that might be like, yeah, but I have to change something first before I can do whatever. And the answer is like, actually, no. In my awakening, in 2020 was a deep part of my awakening. And for many people, it was a period of withdrawal from society and isolation and all of that. I was in the food industry, so I was working full time. We had to downsize our company a little bit, and I was working like 18 hours a day, as well as trying to be a father to my daughter part time, as well as whatever. And I I was an executive in this ice cream company, and we had fewer staff, so I was like driving the delivery truck in the back alleys of the Bay Area by the loading docks, and sort of the stinky, dirty parts of the city at 3 a.m. And those were the places that I had some of my deepest spiritual awakening moments. So I share this, like, it doesn't have to be some beautiful meadow in the Himalayas with this beautiful cave and this rushing water. It can be literally like a stinky, piss-stained gutter in the back alleys of San Francisco, and that can be the place where your connection to all things is the greatest, which it was just one of my stories. That's true. It could be anywhere from anybody at any time. It's here for all of us. Every moment of your life it's possible to
Totally. And
drop into this
my
awakening
biggest thing
zone.
was when I lost my mother. That was my awakening because I was so angry. And then I got to introduce to a lady, and then she introduced me to Dolores Cannon. And then I read my first Dolores Cannon book. And that was when I got into books. And I just kind of never looked back after that. And then I decided to take the course that she was, her daughter was offering. And I took it. And now I'm a certified quantum healing hypnotherapist. I love it because I get to work with people that just come to see me and they're like, "Oh, I want to fix this." You can fix this easily. It's all in your mind. Let's
Oh,
make
that's
this
good.
happen. And if you weren't meant to fix it, it's
Yeah,
because your
love that.
past trauma made it so you have to pay back your trauma. And that's the thing too, is like people get the answers they're looking for, and like it's amazing how powerful we truly are. Like I had a woman on my show recently who cured herself of cancer. She had a little bit of chemo, but for the most part she did it herself.
Yeah, it's such a pernicious falsehood, this idea in Western society that we need something outside of ourselves to heal ourselves. Yes, I take herbs, sometimes I take medicine. I just recently had a really bad accident on the ski slopes where I was bruised, where the first bruised so severely from the middle of my back, like dark, almost black, down past my butt. Just like, I'm surprised I'm not paralyzed or dead. And that was just earlier in January, just a few weeks ago. And just every day I've been taking some Advil and some herbs, some turmeric and things like this, but mostly sitting every day doing hours of breath work and prayer. And especially earlier on when I was in so much pain, just like, okay, I have a choice in every moment. I can collapse into some feeling of pity or suffering, or I could just choose that this is a moment of teaching for me. And what tools do I have? Well, I have 20 plus years of spiritual tools. What are some ones I can do right now when I'm lying here in pain? Oh, I can breathe. I'm already breathing. Oh, great. What can I do with that? Let me go into those. 1,000 pranayamas that I learned, or whatever, hundreds of them. Let me just play with them and see which ones enter those parts of myself. Oh, now I'm feeling less of the pain and more energized. Can I actually bring healing to those parts of my body? Can I bring love and healing and tenderness to those parts of my body that are hurting now that I'm out of the acute pain? And just would do that for hours at a time. I know that those experiences were a huge part of the healing I've had, where now I'm doing really well, doing much better. And prayer is so powerful in these deep moments of surrender, like in my recent injury. My friends would pray for me, and I would feel and receive their prayers as these energetic transmissions, which would enter me and go to those parts of me and heal me in a really tangible way, as if I received a beam of sunlight or something like that.
Absolutely, because we're all powerful, right? Like I read in this book, Messages in the Water by Yamamoto, and he was talking about standing around a pond and 32 of them praying, and it went around the world. And it's like all the wars and the destruction and everything, we're the cause of it because we're fighting each other. And because we're fighting each other, our energies are so high right now because the vibrations are just through the roof. I wouldn't even imagine what the scale of vibration is right now with it being 2025, but...
And as there's more higher vibrations right now in this realm, the way it works, we're in a realm of balance. Not everywhere in the universe is, but where we are in this universe of Earth, we're in a realm of balance. So as more and more of us awaken, as there's more higher vibration energies and these connections, these conversations, there's also balancing, going to be more darkness, more heavier energies to balance it out. The way I'm showing this is there will be a time when there will be a phase shift for many of us, where we'll enter a new frequency where we won't have to have as much darkness. But in this realm right now that we're in right now, there is a balancing effect where as there's more and more light, there's going to naturally be more and more darkness. And this isn't bad. This isn't bad. This is the important thing to realize, right? This isn't bad. And these teachings are universal, right? There's, in Crystal and the Way of Light, there's this teaching from the Tibetan traditions where the original Tibetan spirituality is called Bon. And they believe that Bon was not even theirs. They say there's a saying from way back, from thousands of years ago, that these teachings were also present in, I think it's 27 other galaxies far away. And that they're not even theirs. They're to share for all people and all beings across all universes because they're already universal. There's like these teachings are here for all of us across all time.
No, it's amazing when you get into this journey and you just see all the changes, and you can it's almost like people that aren't on your vibration. Like I know my family, they're not on the same vibration as me, so I notice I don't hear from them as often. It's like, and then it brings me more people that are on the vibration that I'm on. So it's like aligning me with people. But also at the same time, I want to help those people that aren't on the same vibration as me. That's why I put content out every day. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I wrote the book I wrote. I want people...
Beautiful.
Go ahead.
And there's all hands on deck right now, right? We're in this period of this massive awakening. And, even people who come to me who are earlier on the path and they're like, oh, I'm just learning. What do I have to share? You share your experience from where it is right now because there's someone right there who's waiting right this moment to hear your story to help them activate their own awakening, right? Their own activation in themselves. And then the more and more of us right now that share our stories and put out content and just be open with our vibrations and not hide them, then we actually transmit that out through the universe and through this world and this realm. And more of us awaken. And this is the reason for this shift. Like we are a part of this awakening by speaking honestly and truthfully from our hearts.
This is definitely the way. This has been a wonderful interview, Aaron, and I'm so glad to have met you. And I wish you nothing but love, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This has been really fun. And bless.
As this conversation comes to a close, Aaron and I reflect on the importance of embracing both light and darkness within our journeys. Our discussion serves as a reminder that personal growth is a continuous process, one that requires presence, compassion, and the courage to share our stories. If this conversation resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey and how nature, connection, and self-awareness play a role in your transformation. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, keep exploring, growing, and awakening to your true self. Much love to you all.